And in today's video, this is a third part in a series answering the question from somebody who showed some interest in my Patreon. And she asked a question as to what kind of creating I'm involved in, or what kinds of products am I producing. What would somebody be supporting if they joined me on Patreon? Unfortunately, she seems to have disappeared, but I hope that this video will be of interest to somebody else, so I'm continuing to complete the series. The first video that I created of this series shared a little bit about the videos that I'm doing, and this particular one might answer why I'm in need of improving equipment, because some of my art and some of the process of my art I could only really show if I have a better video that I can be able to put onto a tripod and be able to film myself doing some art or certain aspects of the art that I'm involved in. So let's see what I'm able to do, what I'm able to come up with. It's a little bit of a challenge, and I'm not quite sure where we'll go with this video. The second part of the series was talking a little bit about the books that I'm involved in writing, and in this video I'm talking about an aspect of my art. There's a lot of art that I would love to get to be doing, and there are a number of paintings that I enjoy doing, but at the moment my focus is on improving my drawings and figuring out what kinds of drawings to do to be able to use to illustrate journals, workbooks, coloring in books, and potentially some of my mother's children's stories, some children's stories that I'm writing. I have a number of books of both low content, medium content, and high content books that are in need of illustration in various different formats. Because I enjoy drawing, I'm very interested in being able to have my own art available to use instead of having to use elements within Canva. Although it's very nice that the elements are available, as I mentioned in my previous video, sometimes the licensing laws and terms change, and so I don't want to get into any problem. And besides, I really enjoy using my art, and actually, when I was much younger, I had an interest in doing book illustration. Really, when I was in high school, I was interested in pursuing some kind of career to do with art. I wasn't sure 100% in what way I would be using art. So that was a reason as to why I went to a career guidance teacher or counselor. And for whatever reason, she came up with the idea of occupational therapy instead of art. She thought that occupational therapy would be using my creative skills together with science and helping people. And from that point of view, she felt that occupational therapy would be all-encompassing. When I started working, I started to become a little bit confused as to whether I needed to have given up on pursuing art itself, and perhaps even book illustration. Book illustration got put on the back burner for a very long time, but it was something that I started to question for a short time in my first year of working, because, as I mentioned in the book that I wrote, I was requested to update or improve the handouts that were given out in the hospital for those who'd undergone any kind of back surgery for principles of back protection. We had 3 handouts, and none of them were in a very, very good condition. They were not very clear. The illustrations needed improving, the text needed improving, the text needed to be merged together, and it was really quite a big job. One of the things that intrigued me and confused me, and it's taken me a long time to figure out why I didn't 100% get to do all of the illustrations for that particular task that was requested of me, is is improving the illustrations or preparing illustrations for the new handout. I got sidetracked, and perhaps it was partly on purpose that I got sidetracked, because there was a question that I was muddling in my mind. I got into a little bit of cognitive dissonance, I guess is the word to use. The problem was that when I was looking for a career, I was, as I say, very interested in pursuing something to do with art, and illustration was an idea that had come to mind, but it was not the only idea. But there were certain people who thought that my art was not good enough for me to be able to pursue art as a career, and certainly not to be able to do book illustration. And yet here I was being asked to improve certain worksheets. In those days, 30 odd years ago, we didn't have the availability of Pixabay or of Creative Fabrica or any of these other platforms. So it wasn't possible for me to go and source art from somewhere else. There also was not a budget for somebody else. Nobody asked me whether I had any artistic ability. I was just expected to be able to produce some kind of illustration that would be good enough to present to patients, that they would be able to understand, whether it was a technique in the ergonomics and body mechanics of being able to use one's back correctly in lifting an item, or in bending and stretching, the various principles of back protection. And in each of those, one needed to be able to illustrate, whether it's having one leg up on a step, whether it was bending down and using your legs to stand up again. Whatever the illustration was involved, the head of department was not so happy with the one worksheet that had just stick figures, and yet the other worksheet that was with figure drawing, the figure drawing was not very accurate, and there were certain problems with that. And I became a little bit confused as to how it is that when I was looking for a profession, I was told that my art wasn't good enough, and yet here, working as an occupational therapist, I was being expected to come up with illustrations that would be good enough to present to patients in hospital, of a quality that they could understand the instructions, the written instructions that were on the adjacent side of the page. Now, this confused me quite a lot. At the time, I did have a chronic illness, as I mentioned in my previous video about the books that I mentioned, that I've been undecided as to whether to complete and publish a book that I was writing about this chronic illness that I've had. But one of the biggest symptoms and the hardest symptoms of this illness is tiredness and lack of energy. And so as a result, when I got home from work, I didn't really have the energy available to be able to devote to spending time researching and drawing and improving my drawing and combining these worksheets. So I got a little bit sidetracked in certain research on the whole topic of back rehabilitation, and from there I came up with a different idea of perhaps a back rehabilitation program or a unit within the hospital. And I had some discussion with one of the doctors, one of the consultants about this quite at length, who gave me another book to read that just distracted me further. And there's a part of me that wonders whether perhaps, although what I was researching was important and it was needed, whether perhaps I was avoiding sitting down and doing what I really wanted, which was that illustration. So now we fast forward a little bit, and before we come right to the present, we're going to fast forward to one of the first times that I was off sick with one of the first secondary infections I had after I was working. I ended up using up all my sick leave, which is one of the reasons that I changed from working in a hospital to working in the school system, and then to working in other manners. But I found that when I was homesick, that instead of doing any catching up on any reading during the time that I was at home, I found myself more and more being drawn towards drawing. And at that stage, because I had quite often had pain in my eyes with one of the secondary infections was an infection in one of my eyes. So I was a little bit intimidated by doing life drawing, partly because I was out of touch with drawing, and I was not, I didn't like the end product of some of the drawings that I did if I was trying to draw, whether it was anything in the room or any mugs or whatever it was that I saw. I didn't like the drawing that I was doing at the time, and so I started doing a certain type of pattern for my own stress release, and came up with my own kind of a form of art therapy in a way. I started filling a number of sketchbooks, and from there, pretty soon we're going to get on to fast forwarding to the present. But here's one example of the sketchbooks that I have, and here you'll see why being able to put this on a tripod to be able to show some of my artwork might be better than how I'm doing it right now. But you can see many drawings with an abstract design that I came up with. I'm not completely showing the full pictures for various reasons. I also started adapting an exercise that's used very often as an art technique of following a line around whatever it is that you see in front of you without taking your eyes off what it is that you're looking at and looking down at the page, and without lifting up your pencil. And then I started adapting that to be an abstract picture. So let's see if I can take one of these out. Here's one of the examples of that. I have many of those. Here's one of my other designs that I then went and drew on the background. I went and drew a couple of dogs. So I have many sketchbooks that are filled with all sorts of patterns, different sizes. Here's a smaller one, sorry, this way around. And let's see if I can flip through any. See on the various pages, I don't necessarily stick to doing parts of people. I like doing combinations of whatever it is that I'm drawing. Not this one happens to be pets. A number of other abstract designs that I do. And fast forward now to today's time. I'm putting aside some of my drawings. Actually, I have a number of drawings that I used to do in the past, also of trying to come up with some products to sell. Here's another one of that abstract design that I was mentioning with faces. There's one that I did with some animals with a more African kind of coloring and design. Some butterflies, with an image that I was doing as a fridge magnet. There's some more of that drawing further down below. More recently, as I'm starting to work on transforming the room that I was using for treating into a studio, I was thinking about my project that I've given to myself to improve my drawing so that I can have more line drawing available for at the quality that I could print some coloring in books for adults, and also to look at how I could be able to get good quality pictures into the drawings of mine into the computer. And I came across a roll of fax paper, which I'd been given many years ago maybe about 20 years ago. Somebody had given me this roll of fax paper and said to me that they were no longer using their fax machine, and perhaps I could use it in my private practice. And I thought of doing a number of different activities with children, and perhaps I would be able to use this fax paper, or perhaps I would use it in a fax machine. But pretty soon fax machines changed, and it was no longer a roll of paper of this kind, but rather it was single sheets of paper being put into a fax machine that was now a combination of a printer, fax machine, and a photocopier. And so I no longer needed this fax paper, and it sat for years. And I thought, what can I do with this paper, as I'm going through and seeing which of my items I can put to good use, which of my items I could sell, and which of my items I should be donating. This fax paper bothered me, and then I came up with the idea of using it for drawing on. So now, on the one end that had been open, I added in a piece of plastic tubing that I'd used in my hand therapy, and I've used that to be able to roll. And I took the idea of my husband's Sefer Torah or Megillah, that you can roll it. And here now I have my fax paper. And if you have a look on the other side, you'll see the drawings that I'm doing. The downside of this, there's another one. The downside of this is that it's not so easy to see at a glance the drawings that I'm doing, or to be able to get a glimpse of the progress of my drawings. The fun side of it is that as I'm drawing, it's quite fun and quite satisfying to a certain extent. Here's some flowers that I'm doing. Not sure if you can see that. The tree house. So one of my portraits. So the fun side is it's quite satisfying to see the progress as I roll the fax paper and keep on rolling and keep on adding more and more drawings. In the beginning, I thought of using it just for drawing and improving my drawing of plants and of nature. And for those who speak Hebrew, I jokingly called this my Megillat Prachim. And here's a flower that I'm considering being able to figure out how to do in a format that would go into a coloring in book. I don't know if perhaps that's showing enough of the different kinds of drawing that I do. My drawing varies. It's not always the same quality every day. Some days, if I'm a little bit tired, or if it's an image that I'm drawing that I don't have as much skill in, then the end product might not be exactly what I want. But I've reached a stage in my journey and in my art that I've realized that there's a value in drawing every day, even if the end product is not what I'm wanting. Still, it gets the eye in. I do quite a lot of drawing exercises that are improving drawing a straight line, or drawing circles and freehand and making sure that they're perfect circles, and then turning that into a pattern. There are all sorts of, here I was doing a drawing exercise. Sometimes I do follow tutorials, and here I'm practicing doing different parts of the face. More flowers. These ones are sweet peas. So it's quite a bit of fun, and I'm not 100% sure what I'll do with this Megillat Prachim, with this fax paper, once it's completed and filled up with all sorts of different drawings. But that's a little snippet of what I'm doing on the drawing side. And as I say, my goal is to learn to master PowerPoint. I've been learning certain things of what's possible to do with LibreOffice and with Word, and there is a lot that one can do. Some of the borders in Word I like, some of the borders I don't like, and I'm hoping that I can be able to figure out how to create some vector drawings that I can make up my own borders and be able to use them in some of the workbooks that I have in mind. So having come almost full circle, having been told that my drawing wasn't good enough, that my art was not good enough to pursue a career in art, and that I wouldn't be any good in doing book illustration, I was then asked to illustrate these handouts, which for whatever reason within me, I struggled to get to do those drawings. Perhaps I had a little bit of a resistance because I was frustrated that I was encouraged to do a different kind of profession, and I learned a lot about occupational therapy. There's a tremendous amount to the profession that's really valuable. The problem and the inner struggle that I often have is because of the fact that I didn't really want to be a therapist. I love the creating part, and I love drawing, I love exploring nature, I love being able to tell a story or to give over a story either through illustration or through the written word, or even in these videos that can be able to inspire people or teach a message. And as I mentioned in my previous video, I'm very interested in preventing problems and in promoting health and well-being. And more recently, something that I've perhaps come across, perhaps it's because of COVID and starting to let go of the idea of treating in person, but I started rereading some of the books that I have, and dipping into some books that I hadn't even read, that had been sitting on my bookshelf. And in one of the books, I discovered a reminder that the profession of occupational therapy, or really any health profession, but especially in occupational therapy, there really is a need for writing books or manuals or creating products that are of benefit within the profession. And so that if somebody is frustrated or is burnt out or is wanting a change from treating in person, it doesn't mean that you have to completely give up the profession of occupational therapy. This is something that was quite an eye-opener to a certain extent, and to a certain extent completing writing my first book, which is the one that's published, Healing Your Life Through Activity, gave me the opportunity to discover that there is benefit, and it's possible, and it's a very creative and a very satisfying process to write a book and to see it out in print, and to know that that can be out in the world and assist somebody else. Certainly I know there's somebody in Australia who read the book and whose granddaughter is now studying occupational therapy. So I'm hoping that that book is of some benefit to some people. Interestingly for me, as I closed that book, completed the editing, and now it was up and published and out in print, I finally realized that it's time for me to stop working. It did take a little bit of, not stop working, but to stop treating. It did take a little bit of time for me to let go completely of working in person. And as I say, to a certain extent, that's a gift that I've had from COVID, that I was no longer working in person. So letting go of that, and now turning my attention to creating a range of different products. Some of them I do have in the physical, that I'm wanting to be able to sell in the physical, as being that we've got hand knitted beanies and bags, and my mother's done a number of teddy bears. I have paintings that are done on canvas. I have paintings that are on tablecloths, table mats, cushion covers. I used to paint on t-shirts. Now I've started to figure out about doing designs that I could put onto t-shirts, on print on products, print on demand. But the downside with this whole transition is that I've come across a number of obstacles to the shipping side. So one of the things that I really like about the concept of creating low content or medium content books is having them available. At the moment I'm doing KDP. I potentially am thinking of getting to be able to also use other self-publishing platforms, perhaps Ingram Spark, I haven't decided yet. But the benefit of those is that once the manuscript is together and the cover is together, that can be printed and shipped directly from Amazon or from whatever platform I might be printing through, and that would avoid my shipping issue. I do still have items that I'm wanting to ship in person, and so if anybody is watching this and has answers as to how to ship from Israel, I'm open to suggestion. Perhaps I'll pick up on that in a different video, but certainly I would say that a problem is the cost involved. I'm exploring the door-to-door service offered now from the Israel Post, but FedEx, UPS, and DHL and those kinds of services, if I was to ship overseas, the costs of shipping are tremendously expensive. That's one of the biggest problems. If I could get my volume of shipping up, I can bring down the price to a certain extent. So anybody is interested in purchasing any of our gifts, please do be in touch, and that will help us to be able to start to negotiate better prices. But more about the shipping side we'll get to in a different video. I think that's enough for now. It's much longer than I thought of doing, and let me know if you have any questions or if you enjoyed seeing a snippet of my artwork. There's another video up about my artwork, and I hope that's answered what kinds of art I'm involved with, what kinds of books that I'm writing, and I'm hoping to get to another aspect of the products that we were creating in another video, and also to follow up with the shipping story. So that's it for now. Shoshana Shir coming to you from Jerusalem. If you're interested in more of my work, do check out my websites, which you'll find both on beahappymom.com and on my online store on creationsfromjerusalem.com. And stay tuned to this channel if you're interested in seeing more of my art or finding out about the other journals that I'm creating. You'll see some more improvement taking place on my Author Central, some more of the journals coming into my store, and a lot of work to take place. So it's enough for now, and I wish you a very blessed day. If you've enjoyed this video, do give us a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel to find out more about my creative process, how I'm finding ways to be able to earn being in moving to working from home. If you're wanting to know more about why I'm working from home, I'm happy to share a little bit of that as well. Not all of it, but a little bit of that. And I'll see you in another video.